At Chernovoda, we had to suffer indoctrination lectures every Sunday when we hoped for rest. In the afternoon, the room chief marched us to the assembly hall, where a woman speaker addressed us. She began by telling us what she thought about God, which was not much, and she warned that anyone who spoke about him would be punished. "Outside, everyone is now communist," she explained. "Only you persist in this religious folly, and we mean to educate you out of it. The party is in power now, and it knows best. You're not here in prison. I won't even hear the word. You're here in an institution for re-education. You'll be building your own future happiness, working for future generations, and by passing the norms of work laid down, you may well hasten your own liberty as a rehabilitated citizen." Then came a propaganda concert. Among us were cabaret singers and small-time actresses, some from the German minority. They had to sing communist songs mocking Germany, praising the Soviet victors. I felt the pain of their humiliation. Physical hurt passes and in a few hours may be forgotten, but humiliation, even when it seems trivial, sears the heart. Only now was I beginning to understand why Jesus spoke of being mocked and crucified. I'd wondered before why mockery was worth mentioning in the same breath. Now I knew how it could hurt and go on hurting. A German woman was standing on the platform at the end of the hall. She was middle-aged, had once been plump and pretty. She clasped her hands pathetically as she sang, her voice cracking on high notes. The officers in the front row hooted with laughter. What could be funnier than a faded fraulein making fun of herself? Tears ran down her cheeks as she quavered on. Next came a woman, still quite young, who read a poem dripping with gratitude to the Soviets for saving us from the Nazis. "Mother Russia, thank you for what you've done today. The glorious Red Army has shown us all the way," etc., etc. This doggerel was loudly cheered by all present, the room chiefs leading. Anyone showing a lack of enthusiasm was in for trouble. Informers were watching closely for socially rotten reactions. I couldn't condemn the women who took part in these charades. They were worn down with suffering. What was a misery to some of us was an hour's escape for others, and everyone was doing it. Hadn't Romania's most famous religious composer, Arel Baranga, turned his hand to writing communist anthems? He was a prisoner at one of the canal camps now. Few resisted, and those who did were not unaffected by these indoctrination hours which went on every Sunday at almost every camp on the canal. Some of the rubbish they threw at you was bound to stick. I couldn't applaud at the meetings. Everyone said, "Pretend! What does it matter? Is it worth a beating?" But when I heard God and the Fatherland slandered and saw beauty trampled in the dirt, I couldn't. There were always people standing at the back of the hall, and I buried myself among them. But I didn't escape. Someone reported me, and in the evening I was marched into the Commandant's office. Her eyes were unwinking under the peaked cap. "I have information that you failed to clap during this afternoon's lecture and re-education class, Wurmbrand. All your behavior here has shown you to be counter-revolutionary, unamenable to proper re-education." She mouthed the ritual phrases, then licked her lips. "We tried to be good to you. Now other methods will be used." I wasn't allowed to return to the hut that night. I was marched to the guard room and put into a carcer. It was a narrow cupboard built into the wall in which you could just stand. The iron door had a few holes to admit air, and food was passed through a small slit at the bottom. Carcers existed in every prison. They helped break down resistance before the extortion of a false confession. At the canal, it was the commonest punishment. After a few hours, my feet were burning. The blood in my temples beat with slow, painful thuds. How many hours would they keep me here? How many years could I last in such conditions? I thought, this evil is spreading over the whole world. It will torment new millions. No one will escape. But this was the path of madness. I knew people had been driven insane in these boxes. They had let these thoughts of horror overcome them. But how to escape? Richard had told me about the monks of Mount Athos, who repeat incessantly the prayer of the heart. They say, with every heartbeat, "Lord Jesus, Son of God, have pity on me." I used the prayer myself. Then I remembered Richard had passed evenings explaining to me the numerical secrets of the Bible. Neither the Hebrews nor the Greeks had numbers as well as letters. The letters of the Bible are also numbers. A is 1, B is 2, and so on. And every number has a symbolic value. So I tried to count. Drops of water were falling from somewhere on the roof of the box. It was a desolate sound. I counted them to make time pass. 1, there is one God. 2, there are 2 tables of the law. 3 is for the Trinity. 4, Christ will gather his elect from the 4 corners of the earth. 5, for the 5 books of Moses. 6, the number of the beast in Revelation is 666. 7 is the holy number. But the sound of dripping water went on, and when I reached 15, 16, the numbers meant nothing, and I went back to the start. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how long I did this, but at a certain moment I simply began to cry aloud to avoid despair. 1, 2, 3, 4, I cried, and again, 1, 2, 3, 4. After a time the words became inarticulate. I didn't know what I meant. My mind had moved into rest. It blacked out. Yet my spirit continued to say something to God. I should explain this further, for it is one of the keys to survival in prison. With all the worry and misery, you wished often to black out the mind. You sought desperately to escape, but you were hounded and obsessed by thoughts that could lead you into deeper mental trouble. Just as an injured leg is put into plaster to rest, so a tormented mind, a sick mind, a mind grieved by remorse, needs rest if it is to be healthy. It is known that there existed in the early church, and also in the Greek mysteries, a phenomenon called glossolalia, speaking in unknown tongues. Religion could never find expression only in words. From the beginning, it has been shown also in music, the dance, and painting. Language is an imperfect tool. When I say, I love apple pie, I love my wife, I love God, I express 3 utterly different feelings with one word. And between love and hatred, there are as many nuances of feeling that cannot be put into words as there are fractions between 1 and 2. What a mother feels for her child cannot be fitted into words, and frequently she does not use them. She says, "Callum lumsy toodlums," or whatever, and the child is very happy to hear it. So there is this phenomenon of glossolalia, of unknown tongues, of articulated words. Out of the depths of the heart, in moments of ecstasy or terrible suffering, come sounds, come expressions of love towards God, towards fellow men, made up of words that exist in no dictionary. The mind blacks out. As the Bible puts it, "He that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaks not unto men, but unto God." In the carcer, this blacking out of the mind, so as to allow unreasoning sounds to come out from the depths of the subconscious, saved my sanity. After an hour or 2, my mind came back, rested. I found, too, that speaking in these unintelligible tongues has one great advantage. You never lie. You deceive no one. It snowed heavily during the night. As we formed up before the rows of huts, thick flakes continued to fall. The skeletal guard towers had almost vanished behind the white veil, but the wind had dropped. Every sound was dull and dead. From the distant kitchen, steam was rising through a ventilator. That promise of warmth was only an additional affliction. Few politicals were ever granted kitchen work. The laundry ran it a close second. The daily quota there was tough, 30 sheets, 30 pillowcases, plus shirts and underpants, all done by hand with scraps of low-grade soap. But at least it was inside. That morning, more than the usual number of women tried to report sick. Anna Crețianu, camp doctor and herself a prisoner, was not interested. "Nothing wrong with you," she said. "Past fit for work." How prisoners loathed that whining voice. Dr. Crețianu had sold herself for the right to stay indoors out of the snow and rain. She had powers of life and death in a sense that must have been new to the medical profession. She knew that in sending out certain women to work, she was condemning them to death. Some were so weak that they fainted on hearing that they must go out again to the quarries. But she had her orders from the medical board. The more women she allowed to go sick, the less was her own chance of survival or release. In Hut 10 was another doctor prisoner who had kept her integrity. The inmates used every subterfuge to keep her, if only for a few days, inside the camp. She was over 60 and unfit to march miles to the quarry, let alone work there. And she knew her medicine far better than Crețianu. But the camp commandant was well satisfied with her choice of physician. The Hut 10 doctor had to push wheelbarrows. An aspirin, a warm drink, any kind of pain reliever was just a dream to us. Toothache had to be borne. The camp was rife with a variety of female diseases brought on by hard work. They were correctly diagnosed by teams of prisoner doctors. Treatment was another matter. As we tramped through the snow, Corinne said, "Let's not think about Crețianu. She's to be pitied." Whenever I hear her crying, "Fit for work," I remember a friend of mine, a woman doctor who deliberately joined the militia. For Christ's sake, she put on that hateful uniform and played the convinced communist only to help others. She did wonderful work for the sick before she was betrayed by an informer. She's in prison now. Poor soul, she must have been a kind of saint. We stumbled on over the white plain under the dark sky. In the muffled silence, the noise of hammering from the quarry sounded strangely desolate. During the morning, I crushed my fingers between 2 heavy blocks of stone. It was agony lifting each block into the truck. An elderly woman, a newcomer, noticed my trouble and tried to help me. She asked whether in prison I'd come across a girl called Fanny Marinescu. "Yes," I said. "I knew her well. I used to teach her French in Jalava, and we became friends." "What happened to her?" I said, "She went to heaven. She died of cancer, left too long untreated." Then the woman began to weep, and I somehow understood that she was Fanny's mother. A guard posted himself next to us, and we couldn't talk. One didn't stop work because one's child had died. She stumbled blindly about, clutching the boulders, with tears running down her face. Our hearts and cut hands bled in equal measure. It wasn't until next day that I could try to offer a few words of comfort. We were waiting at the midday break for the food to come. "Fanny is in heaven now," I said. "She died in faith in the Redeemer, who is the giver of life everlasting." "In heaven!" Easily said, if it was your daughter. So I told her how I had lost my own family under the Nazis and my orphan children on the ship to Israel. Yet one need not lose peace and serenity. We are all transitory beings, but there is also an eternal existence with God. That is our comfort. We sat together, nursing our crushed fingers, waiting for the greasy soup. Our legs and arms trembled with exhaustion. She told me her name was Cornelia. I said, "Your daughter helped many prisoners through hours of depression, telling them about eternal life. I helped others, and you helped me to lift these stones, and in heaven is the great helper who cares for those whom we have lost." She seemed a little comforted. One evening she came to my hut. Not many guards were about on cold nights, and she had slipped across the yard unseen. I felt someone sit down on the bed and touch my arm. I opened my eyes and sat up. Cornelia smiled tremulously. "Let me sit here a little. The devils don't seem to have so much power beside you." Every Christian reflects a little of the glory of the Lord. In times of suffering, others might observe it. "All our hut has been punished," said Cornelia. "I couldn't get out before. We've had to clean the floor every evening this week." She stroked her thin arms within the old cardigan for warmth. "But I didn't come here to complain. I want to tell you something I'll never tell anyone else as long as I live." The delicate face became transparent. The suffering was transfigured with joy. "I fell asleep last night without undressing, and at once I was in a great field as wide as the plain of Baragon where we work. But as far as the eye could see, it was full of flowers. The air was filled with a piercing, sweet fragrance, like lily of the valley, and I felt my daughter was there. Although it was so vast, it was also somehow homely. I'd never seen so many herbs and flowers in one place. There was a sound of wasps and bees, and clouds of butterflies, great masses of them, all glittering with color, coming toward me. I felt such tranquility of the spirit. All the beauty and majesty of the earth seemed to be gathered in one place. Standing alone in a corner, I saw a woman who came towards me. She had eyes that looked gently into your very heart, and she put into my hands a bunch of white lily from the valley. Oh, the fragrance was sweet. It hasn't left me yet. From the center of the field, I heard the voice of a man, strong and sweet, saying clearly the words of Solomon's song, "As the lily among the thorns, so is my love among the daughters." And then I woke up and realized I was still at the canal, and those fearful madmen, the guards, were waiting for me. But when they banged the rail at 5, I got up and went out to the quarries as if I'd been dancing in meadows to delight my beloved one. I still see the field of flowers and smell their fragrance and hear that voice. And the woman, I'll never forget her. The memory lived in her heart. She looked with new eyes on the thousands of small kindnesses, beauties, signs, and wonders that are evidence of his presence. Sometimes the stones of remembrance which we took from the valley of suffering were beautiful.